The monastics at Sravasti Abbey have been going to the Universal Unitarian Church for about 9 years. And this year we started a book that I read years ago, Working with Anger. I always told people it's such a great book. And that's about as far as I went with it. And in the last several weeks, we've been going through this book very, very slowly. It's a fabulous workbook. It really is terrific. Every chapter is loaded with techniques on how to work with anger. And actually, this would be a great coffee table book to have out in your house. Don't hide it when guests come. Have it out there. Yeah, it's not, one of these, but it's just so valuable. And I thought I'd share with you something from the preface that Venerable Chodron wrote years ago, and this book came out in 2001. So she writes this: as powerful as anger is, it lacks any material substance whatsoever. Nevertheless, it can drastically affect our lives and the lives of others. When we look into our own minds and hearts and understand this disturbing motion better, we will recognize its unrealistic projections and thus will not buy into its story so readily. We will gradually be able to distance ourselves from this painful emotion without suppressing, repressing, or expressing it. We will replace it with more wholesome and beneficial states of mind. And in this way, patience, fortitude, tolerance, love, and compassion will grow within us. Learning the techniques for doing this is the purpose of this book. Working with anger is written for everyone, because no matter what our education, socioeconomic class, gender, race, or religion, we risk falling prey to anger's clutches. Written in informal, friendly language, this book includes numerous examples of daily life situations in which these techniques and teachings may be applied. Some of the examples were told to be by friends, family, and students, while others are from my own life. So it's a book that we all need. It's not a book that we give to all the members of our family and we say, here, please read this. This is a book that we gift ourselves with first. And then, if people are asking us, hey, what are you doing differently? Then we can say, oh, there's this great book. You should check it out. This past week at UU, we've been working on the chapter that involves blame. And this is a great chapter. And it takes me back to one of the first books I received from a friend. It was a general Dharma book. But in the book, I discovered that there's no one to blame. And I became enraged. I thought, are you kidding me? There's no one to blame? What am I going to do then? Who's responsible? Well, I'm responsible. And there's also other conditions that come together for any situation. And I think until we hit some kind of spiritual practice, our knee-jerk reaction is to blame other people when things happen to us that are unpleasant. The finger goes out this way, and we blame others, or the other ditch is we completely blame ourselves, and we're totally responsible for this event. So either one, I think we've got to get this gesture out of our vocabulary and the word blame and fault out of our vocabulary. So Venerable Chodron says this about blame. We generally frame unfortunate or painful circumstances in terms of blame. Either we or the other party is to blame. Fault and blame are very harsh words in our culture. They imply being evil and guilty. This way of conceiving situations leads to a dead end. If we blame the other, we become angry, outraged, and vindictive. If we blame ourselves, we become depressed and self-destructive. It's impossible to heal when we're caught up in blaming. So you can, check that out in your own experience. Bring to mind times where you're blaming someone or something for something. And just see, did it get you anywhere closer to resolving the situation or healing it? And in my experience, it never got me anywhere other than the ruminating mind and the more miserable mind. Then she goes on to say, examining the role of our behavior played in the evolution of a bad situation doesn't mean blaming ourselves for things that are not our responsibility and feeling guilty as a result. Getting down on ourselves is actually another trick of the self-centered attitude. It exaggerates our own importance by thinking, well, if I'm not the best, then at least I'm not the worst, or I am the worst. So she says, people often do this blame thing, blaming ourselves by saying things like, well, the marriage ended because I wasn't loving enough, or the project failed because I botched it up. And she says, unfortunately, we have to realize that we are not so powerful that we can cause everything to go wrong by ourselves. And so what this chapter on blame beautifully guides us to see is that blame, when we engage in blame, we narrow it down to actually one thing. It's one person's fault, or it's one single aspect of a situation, when in fact, a situation that's unpleasant or painful is, brought about by many, many causes and conditions. Some of them we can figure out, and actually some of them we can't know. And then there's the aspect, since we're Buddhists, that this is a situation of karma ripening. And there's all of that going on too, as well as, our afflicted mental states. So this is the clincher paragraph in this chapter for me. And Venerable Children says this: framing situations in terms of blame is both inaccurate and useless. Rather, in each situation, we need to evaluate which factors are our responsibility and which are others' responsibility. And this involves clearly reflecting on the situation without exaggerating either our own or others' power or importance. In this way, we will observe the factors that we contributed to, make amends for them, and try to avoid them in the future. We will also then discern which factors others contributed, and although we may not condone their actions, we can feel compassion for their confusion. So this takes some analytical meditation. And I think the best way of going about this situation of, first of all, targeting the habit of blame, because I think we all have it, is to bring to mind situations that aren't really loaded and charged and highly emotional, and start with simple ones. So I'm going to give you an example of a situation that happened in my life years ago. It's not charged anymore. It used to be. And then we can just see how we can take apart a situation and see, okay, what was my part in this? What was the part of the other people? And all the other environmental things and, past karma. So I'm going to start off with an NVC technique of stating the observation, which I couldn't do when I was 10 years old. I can barely do it now. So here's the situation. When I was 10 years old, I left my bicycle on its side on the grass between our house and the neighbor's house. My dad backed his truck up to our house to bring something in, and he ran over my bicycle. It was destroyed. So there's the observation. Now, as a 10-year-old, when I came out and I saw this mangled mess underneath my dad's truck, I was heartbroken. And my dad was really mad. And he had reasons to be mad. So let's take this part. Okay, so what was my part in this? Well, for years our parents asked us, don't leave your bicycles on the grass on their side. Go and lean them up beside the house. For years we heard that. Next thing, my family, when I was growing up, my parents had very little extra money, and they bought my brother and I similar bicycles about 2 years before this situation. We were absolutely thrilled. I love this bicycle. And so they were really telling us, they were teaching us or trying to teach us how to take care of our belongings. Did we listen? No. Where did I leave my bicycle that day? Well, it was basically on our neighbor's property. It wasn't even on our property. It was in a place that my dad would never expect in a million years for a bicycle to be. And then what was his mental state that day? Well, in those years, he was working 7 days a week because he owned his own electrical business and he had an electrical shop. And so he was really working very hard just to take care of all of us. So by the time he got back that day, it was probably 6 p.m. He was exhausted. He didn't anticipate a bicycle being where he was driving and backing up. He couldn't see the bicycle. And so why was he angry? Well, he was angry because, number one, he had told us for years not to do that with our bicycles. And number two, there went his hard-earned money. It was just a mangled mess. So, of course, he was angry and disappointed, you know. Next thing was, that bicycle was never replaced. Now, what was my part in that? There, I was playing the victim. You know, by the time I was about 7, I was getting a weekly allowance for chores. I could have saved up for a new bicycle. It might have taken me until I was 25. But did I think of that? I didn't think of that because I was blaming my dad. So first I was heartbroken, then I was really angry and disappointed and sad. But it was definitely my dad's fault in a child's mind. You know, it was my dad's fault. So when we start taking apart situations, you know, when you do that with a simple thing, you can see there's no fault there. It's a situation that happened. There's no one to blame. Everyone in their own way made a mistake, whether it was intentional or not. You know, I was lazy. But am I to blame solely for the whole thing? As a child, you could assume that, especially when your parent gets angry. Oh, it's all my fault. But it wasn't. And it wasn't all my dad's fault. So this idea of blaming others or situations really, as Venerable says, she's just so clear about this. It's both inaccurate and useless. We need to evaluate which factors are our responsibility and which are others. And this clearly involves reflecting on the situation without exaggerating either our own or others' power or importance. And then when we take it apart like this, and we can see there's no blame, then healing can happen, we can drop it, we can move on, and, you know, harmony is restored in relationships. And we have more compassion for people who maybe there was a significant thing on their part in the event. You know, maybe they were the major cause in a certain way, but there were all these other causes and conditions, and then karma ripening. Likely I destroyed belongings of other people in a previous life. And I have the habit of being lazy. So there you go. So it's very complex. And it really actually eases the mind to see what's going on in a situation rather than this or this. So, great book. I highly recommend it. Don't just give it to your family for Christmas. Give yourself a copy and practice the techniques.